Welcome to Influential Entrepreneurs, bringing you interviews with elite business leaders and experts, sharing tips and strategies for elevating your business to the next level. Here's your host, Mike Saunders.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Influential Entrepreneurs. This is Mike Saunders, the Authority Positioning Coach. Today we have with us Donald White, who's the author of Always End with the Beginning in Mind, How Firms Remain Great After the Founder Exits. Donald, welcome to the program.
Hey, thank you, Michael. It's good to hear your voice.
You know, I love the title of your book because I love plays on words, and the old saying, knowledge is power, and people are like, yeah, it sure is, and I'm like, wait a minute here, and you know where I'm going with this, but it's like, no, knowledge is only potential power. You have to put it into action, and people are like, oh yeah, well, obviously that people know the old Stephen Covey quote, begin with the end in mind. Well, always end with the beginning in mind. I'm excited to talk through that concept. But before we get into that, give us a little bit of background on your entrepreneurial journey and then what led you to this point in your career.
Well, thank you, Michael, first of all, for inviting me and allowing me to be a part of this. I've been very fortunate in my career. I will tell you, though, it has not been the straight up wonderful and everybody's just great. It's been a lot of challenge, a lot of work, a lot of failure, a lot of struggling. In fact, there was an article that was written about me many years ago in Entrepreneurial Magazine called Fired Up, because I kept getting fired, but I would figure out a way to move up from that firing. and so the first time I got fired was when I was 23 years old. I was working for an insurance company, and they decided they didn't need my services any longer, and so they asked me to leave, and I was like completely devastated, but I was able to hook up with another insurance company, went to work for that insurance company, started as a recruiter, sales manager, whatever you want to call it. I was so good at sales management and recruiting that after I recruited 12 guys and all 12 guys failed, they fired me. And so I ended up losing that job, and then I went to work for a company called E.F. Hutton, if you remember E.F. Hutton.
Yeah.
When E.F. Hutton talks, people listen was the old adage. Yeah. I went to work for E.F. Hutton. They were doing really well, and I was doing extremely well with them. It was probably the turning point of my career was going to work for E.F. Hutton. And then in 1988, suddenly, boom, E.F. Hutton goes out of business. They just ceased to exist. Were taken over by Shearson Lehman Brothers, and Shearson Lehman Brothers eliminated my department, and guess what? Got fired again. Hey. But I was fortunate enough to know some really awesome people, and they invited me to go to work for Prudential Bache. I went to work for Prudential Bache and was cranking with Prudential Bache. Regional Vice President for Florida. I mean, everything was just absolutely spectacular. And then the guy who took over the Hutton from Shearson Lehman came and became my boss, and guess what he did?
Fired you.
Fired me again. which actually caused me to start my own company in 1994, and that really was the turning point of my life. That company was called Treasure Coast Financial, and it was a unique company because we did something that everyone told us we couldn't do, and I just had this vision, and all that time that I was working for these companies in management, I had a vision that there was a great need for a Christian financial planning firm, and no one ever even put those words together before. Yeah. And I had a great friend at that time. We were talking about off air, a fellow by the name of Larry Burkett, and he encouraged me to do it. And so with Larry's help and a lot of other people's guidance, we decided to start a financial planning firm. And basically what that means is that we basically advised people from a biblical perspective and use the Bible as our guidepost for the things that we wanted to do in our investments. And we did it primarily to a Christian audience. And it was just fascinating how well it worked out. All of our employees became people of faith, and everyone that was surrounded with the company. Around that, I started a Christian radio station down in West Palm Beach, or helped start that, and that has expanded itself to where it now is a national outfit. You are actually aware of it because they're headquartered up in your area of the world in Colorado. And so we were very, very blessed to have had a really great run. We took our company, expanded to 2 locations, and then I merged with another believer who had the same idea I did, and we ended up creating a company called Collaborative Wealth. And Collaborative Wealth has 5 locations throughout Florida, and I ultimately sold my practice to them in October of 2019. And now all I'm doing is writing and enjoying the speaking and so forth. Now, it's unfortunate with COVID, I have not been able to do much speaking. As I told you earlier, I've been speaking since 1995, but it's really something we're excited about seeing happen here in the next coming months.
Coming on up, we can get back to a little bit more of what that used to be, and I love that lead up. It kind of makes me think, at some point when you moved from the world of running your business to then the world of let's sell it, you in essence gave yourself the ultimate quote unquote firing, because you're like, okay, I'm moving on, not firing, but I'm moving on up again. I really want to dive into succession planning, because I think it is really important, and I absolutely love the title of your book. It reminds me, and it's really curious, because I think succession planning is not only in the C-suite, because as an example, I'm a deacon at our little local Baptist church here in Colorado, and my father-in-law was pastor there for 35 years, and about 3 years before he retired, he came to the board and he says, okay, I'm retiring in 2 years or 3 years, and so we need to start talking about my succession plan. And who would have thought a pastor of a little church would be thinking succession plan? But he started doing things that are probably very similar to what you will talk about here, that you teach in your book, which is I started writing down things that I do on a daily basis. Like when the fire alarm goes off, here's how you fix it. And when we do this, and here's my little operations manual, and I'm going to put it in a binder, and anyone coming behind me can just kind of follow in my footsteps and improve and tweak and all that, but at least see what's going on. But I love the concept of succession planning. And here's my question for you. When you thought of moving out of owning your business and into the next chapter of your life, you did it, but then the thought came to your mind, let's write a book about doing it successfully. You could have just retired on the golf courses of Florida and been done with it. But what made you think, I need to write this book, always end with the beginning in mind?
Michael, there couldn't have been a better question. At the end of the day, I was completely convinced that there wasn't enough information out there. When I decided to make the decision to move on, I concluded that there were only 2 choices. You either leave too soon or you leave too late.
Yeah.
And too late is not a good choice. So I was completely committed to the fact that I would leave before it was necessary for me to leave. I didn't want anybody walking me out, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to be in a situation where I could do it at my own volition. Look, you only have 3 choices in that regard as well. You can do it on your own volition, you could do it on someone else's volition, or you can do it on God's volition, right? At the end of the day, you're going to get moved out. It's just a question of how. So I felt like if I could do it on my own volition, that would be the preferred way. And I also felt like if you do it early, you're better off than doing it late. But the most important thing I found out was there was nothing out there as far as other resources. There was a couple of books out there. Finish Big was one by Bo Burlington. But Bo's a great guy, but he's an ink reporter. He's he's not an entrepreneur,
practitioner.
There were no books. There were no books out there written by guys who did it. And so I said, you know what, I'm going to do this. And so I sat down and I started writing this book. I submitted it to a publisher out in Seattle. He thought it was amazing. And the next thing you know, we have a book. So that's kind of, and now I'm talking to Michael Saunders.
Yeah.
It's just that simple.
Well, and I think that you have to, in some senses, hey, I'm leaving the company. I'm kind of looking over my shoulder, and everything is humming right along. Okay, everyone's smiling and hugging and high fiving. Okay, great. And I hand the keys over to the new people, and the transaction monetarily made sense. Everyone's happy. Okay, great. I did it well. But in reality, there might be some maybe misconceptions that people have when it comes to succession at all, as well as succession planning in advance of the move. What do you find some of those mistakes being?
Well, the first mistake that I see is that we don't need to do this. It's not really necessary for me. Maybe it's good for Michael, but it's not really something that Donald needs to do. At the end of the day, everyone needs to be viewing their succession, and they need to be viewing it long before they need to do it. So I think one of the things that I say in the book, which I think is extremely important, is that you've got to be planning long before you need to be planning. You don't want to be in a situation where you're forced to do this. That's a kind of a other people's volition or God's volition kind of thing. You don't want to do it because you got sick. You don't want to do it because you're... In fact, I tell a great story in the book about a guy who put it off, and suddenly one day was with a client, had a heart attack while he was with his client. Should have died, but didn't. And then basically he came to this crazy decision that he was going to sell his company, and he sold it to the first guy he met, basically, the wrong guy for him. Not necessarily the wrong guy for the company, but certainly the wrong guy for him and for his employees, as it turned out. And he did it because of fear. He did it because he was freaking out. And at the end of the day, there's too many people that make decisions based upon fear and not based upon the fact that this is the best thing for my people. And one of the things that I think is absolutely essential is that if in business we can always think of putting people over profit, over profit. If we can think about that, it begins to change the whole entire dimension of your world. I've always believed that when you put people over profit, your profit actually ends up greater, which is the great dilemma or dichotomy really of the statement if you think about it. And that's the essential thing that we're talking about here. So when I talk about people, I'm not just talking about your family. I'm talking about your work family. I'm talking about namely your employees. I'm talking about your clients. I'm talking about even your vendors. These are all people. Think about it. Everybody involved in a company are people. And you need to put those people over the profitability of the company. And when you do that, it's amazing, but the profitability of the company actually ends up even greater eventually, if not almost right away.
It makes me think of a couple authors and books that I absolutely love. I've interviewed the authors several times. Have you ever read the book Giftology?
I have not, no.
And then what about The Go-Giver by Bob Burg?
Well, I do know Bob, and so yes, I have read that book. Okay. Great book.
So obviously, The Go-Giver, giving value, serving, not gimme. So it's a wonderful book written in fictional storybook format, great read. And then Giftology is the concept of giving gifts and not just, sending the traditional whatever flower basket, but John Ruhlin wrote that book, and he uses strategic gifting. Well, in that you might think, well, I want to use gifting as a way of giving value, like being the go-giver, so that I get something back. Well, that now corrupts the whole process. So you need to give it for the sake of, developing that relationship. But John Ruhlin made a really interesting point in his book, which he said, here we are, this company that teaches other companies how to give these strategic, really meaningful gifts. And if your company starts doing that, you will see wonderful benefits. But guess where you need to start first? Your own company, your own employees. He says if these employees, you're teaching how to give and serve and give all this extra value to their customers, and then you're dumping on them, whether it's a bad work environment or stressful, he says it just is a dissonance. So he goes, just as an example, we pay for, all of our employees to have their house cleaned, so that, they feel like we're giving them value and it's freeing up their time and they feel loved and valued. So talk a little bit about how that giving of value and putting relationships and people before profit, what can that look like tangibly?
Well, the first thing that you want to do is you want to think in terms of how is this in the best interest of the person that's sitting in front of me. No matter what decision you're making, if you always make the decision with the idea that I'm going to do what's in the best interest of the person that this is going to impact, then your chances of making a good decision are exponentially higher. It doesn't mean they're going to be. It doesn't mean you're always going to make the right decision, even when you think you're doing it for the right reasons. But, man, your chances of that happening, they grow, as I said, exponentially. So that idea of putting other people's interest above your own. So I remember back in my own, in our own company, in 1996, we had just started the company. We were 2 years old at the time. And suddenly I found out one of our key clerical people. We only had a couple of clerical people back in those days, believe it or not. We were such a small kind of floundering company. There were 5 of us in the company, and I had, this one gal who was just a terrific gal. Her name was Helen, and Helen got sick. She got cancer. And I realized very quickly that Helen was in a dire situation, because if I let her go, she was going to lose her benefits. If I didn't let her go, I was going to have to find another person to take her place. And now I've got 2 people on payroll, and I've only got 1 person doing the work. And I didn't know what to do. And so I remember going to my wife and saying, we got to keep Helen on payroll. Mm-hmm. And she said, are you insane? We have to hire another person. I know, but we need to keep Helen on payroll. So we made the decision to keep Helen on payroll. And that was a decision of putting other people above our profit. Now, what's amazing about this story is that about 6 months after putting her on payroll, I went and I played golf in a little golf event, and remarkably, I won a Corvette with a hole-in-one. And it was just incredible. I didn't want the Corvette. I immediately thought, oh my gosh, this is so perfect. I'll get paid. I'll take the money instead of the Corvette. I'll put that money in the bank. And now we've got a buffer that we can help pay her expenses, because she needed the health insurance. She needed to make sure and she needed the salary too. And she wasn't going to get enough if we did something else. And it was a decision that we made spontaneously, but together as a group. And I thought, wow, I won this Corvette. This is unbelievable. Here's what happened though. I immediately went to sell the Corvette, and she called me up and she said, no, you can't sell the Corvette. I said, what do you mean I can't sell the Corvette? She said, no, I prayed for you 2 days before you were at that golf tournament, and I prayed God show Don that he made the right decision by keeping me on payroll. And I went, are you kidding me? She said, oh, yeah, no, I prayed that. And so you can't sell the Corvette because that's God's sign to you.
Wow.
I said, no. You know what I hear? I'll tell you what I'm going to do. Now, if you know anything about the financial planning business, you know that our income is all over the place. And so I said to her, I said, look, I'll do this, but the first time that I'm short cash, I'm selling that Corvette. She said, no problem, you sell that Corvette as soon as you go short cash. You know that for the next year and a half, we were never 1 week even short cash, not even 1 week.
Wow. And
she got very, very ill, and I remember it was in October of the following year. She was in hospice, and I went to the hospice, and I saw her, and it was amazing, because usually when I went in there was always somebody there. This time there was no one there, just her. I sat down on the side of her bed, and I thought she was sleeping. I just wanted to hold her hand and just say hello, and she saw me, and she turned, and she said, you can sell the car now.
Huh. Wow.
And that to me was just the epitome of what it means to put people over profit.
Yeah.
And that's what we did. And I sold the car the very next day. 2 days later, she passed away.
Wow.
And I was blessed to give her eulogy at the church, and I told that story at the church, and it was just a remarkable thing that here was this unbelievably cool person who had become a part of our lives, and I never knew her before she came to work with us. I never knew, but we became so involved in their lives and so involved in the people. And that's the way it's always been in our business. We've always had this kind of a relationship where all of our people were the most important thing. And I mean that not only for our employees, but for all of our clients, even our vendors, right down to the people that serve us. We try to always do what's in their best interest. And I'm telling you, your interest will always be taken care of if you do what's in the best interest of other people.
And I am 1,000% sure that story, as impactful as it is, there are 2 dozen, 4 dozen others just like it, where you put people before profits. And I will tie it into that statement into something you said previously, which is you need to be planning for your exit, your succession, long before it actually happens, so that it's seamless, so that you're not shown the door, so that you're prepared. Well, guess what? When a company is putting people before profits in the way you're describing, and all the other ways that we could talk about for the next 4.5 hours, that is planning ahead, because you're not doing it for the purpose of succession. You're doing it for the purpose of it's the right thing and all of these others, but it's creating a culture. It's creating the mission and vision of the company. And then that sets the stage for when you want to exit. So now here's, you're kind of looking back going, this is how we began it, this is how we ran it, and this is how it's going to end. And people are modeling that. And that is the best way, rather than issuing a memo going, make sure you put people above profit. And they're like, all right, boss, we will. How about just follow what I'm doing, and let's all do it together, and let's honor the people that are doing it. Let's catch people in the act of doing it right, not chastising people for doing it wrong, but let's catch people in the act of doing it right. And I think that is such a huge lesson that you just laid out there.
Well, I appreciate that. The subtitle of our book, How Firms Remain Great After the Founder Exits, is really the key to this whole thing. I sold our company in October of 2019. I had no earthly idea COVID was coming.
Yeah.
I had no idea that we were going to have all these shutdowns. I didn't know any of that, obviously. I had no clue. But I knew I had the right team in place. I knew I had the right processes in place. I knew we had everything done correctly. And in March of 2020, which was just 6 months after we had sold the firm, obviously we had this great COVID event. And I remember one of my successors, actually there were two guys that took over the company that were partners in the firm with us. And one of the guys, Stephen, called me up and he said, Don, what should we do, man? I'm freaking out. Maybe we should just, liquidate everything. I mean, what do we do? I don't know. I'm really lost. And I said, Stephen, first of all, you're not lost. You're fine. You're right there. But you're going to do things the way we've always done them. Keep to the process. Focus on the process. Don't get stuck on these things. And what's remarkable to me is I think about what those guys have done. And in 2020, in the midst of a pandemic, they grew our company by over 20%.
Wow. Because they didn't panic.
They didn't panic. They did what we had always said. The processes, they did not deviate from our processes. They didn't just freak out. The most impressive thing, though, is not the growth in the company, because that can happen anyway. It can happen by accident. What impressed me more than anything is we didn't lose any clients as a result of the pandemic, and we didn't lose, and this is the most important, we didn't lose a single employee, not one.
Wow.
Because of the pandemic. Not one of our people left. And I felt very, very strongly that it was because these guys had done what we had instructed them. They had stuck to the process. They knew what we were doing, and they continued to do exactly what we had originally always talked about. So, look, firms can remain great even after the founder exits. But the truth is, if you look at the statistics from the Department of Labor, only 12% of businesses will actually pass to another generation. 12%.
Wow.
That's unbelievable. Think about that. And I'm not just talking about familial situations. I'm talking about any situation. 88% of all companies that start in this country never pass to another generation, never last beyond their founder. And that's insane.
Yeah.
That should not be happening. There's too much blood, sweat, and tears that go into building businesses, too much entrepreneurial skill that's just going down the drain, too many clients, actually, that are being impacted because, well, how many times have you gone to a place that you expected to be open, and then one day you find, oh, it's gone. It's not here anymore. And that's one of the great, horrible feelings as a client. You go and all of a sudden, oh, my ice cream store is gone, or this, whatever. My hairdresser is no longer a hairdresser, or whatever. And that's a tragedy that can be avoided, and that's really what we're talking about in the book.
Yeah, and I think we people can tell that we could talk for about another 3 hours without taking a breath and still be on point 2 and keep it on chugging. So let's wrap up with this. I'm going to leave listeners with a cliffhanger. In your book, you talk about a concept called the Alice in Wonderland syndrome. The Alice in Wonderland syndrome. So when people are listening to this interview and hearing all the wonderful topics and tips that you've presented, I want to encourage them to go pick up a copy of your book, learn about the Alice in Wonderland syndrome. So give us the thumbnail 30,000-foot overview of what that is, and then how can people learn more about that syndrome as well as pick up a copy of your book?
The Alice in Wonderland syndrome is so interesting because it's a picture of Alice. She falls through the rabbit hole, ends up in somewhere. She ends up in Wonderland, and she says to the Cheshire Cat, "Where are you on your way to?" He says to her, and she says, "Well, I'm on my way to somewhere." And he goes, well, where somewhere? She says, I don't know, but I'm on my way there. And the beauty of the Alice in Wonderland syndrome is that too often we find ourselves in a situation where we are on our way to somewhere, but we have no idea where somewhere actually is. And that's one of the great tragedies of business and life, for that matter, is people end up at 60 or 70 years old and they look back at their life and they go, what did I do? Where did it all go? Where did it, what was my direction? I was just on my way to somewhere. I don't even know where somewhere is. And now I've arrived here and I don't like it. Be purposeful in your vision as to exactly where you want to go, because I'm telling you, if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there.
Yep.
And you need to understand that this idea of focusing on where you want to go is really key to being successful in life and in everything, not just in business, but in all forms of life.
I love it. Well, Donald, what's the best way people can reach out and connect with you and learn more about your book and pick up a copy?
Well, of course, DonaldFWhite.com. Donald, just like the duck, F like Frank, White, just like the color, DonaldFWhite.com. If you go there, you can read about our book. You can learn about our speaking and some of the things that we do. If you'd like us to come and speak at your conference or at your business or even at your church or whatever, we're happy to do that. And we have a whole list of different topics and so forth, as well as the session planning that are on the website. Clearly, you can buy the book at anywhere books are sold. Amazon.com, of course, is usually the easiest place. It'll also be the least expensive place. And so if you buy it there, that's great as well. But we'd love to get the book in your hand and give you some insight. And you know what? Don't anyone ever be afraid to look us up on Facebook. You can go to Donald F. White on Facebook, whatever, and just send me a note, send me a message. I return my emails. I return my phone calls. If you ever want to email me, it's simple. It's DonaldFWhite@gmail. DonaldFWhite@gmail.com. It's very, very easy to reach me, and we'd love to visit with you either via email or even on the phone.
Well, Donald, thank you so much for coming on. You've got a wealth of knowledge that I appreciate you sharing with us, and I appreciate your time.
Look to do it again, Michael. Have a great day.
You've been listening to Influential Entrepreneurs with Mike Saunders. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or listen to past episodes, visit www.influentialentrepreneursradio.com.